You're listening to When God Intervenes, the podcast where faith, hope, and healing come together for families with a loved one battling addiction. All right, welcome to another episode of When God Intervenes. I'm Daryl Rogers, your host, and I'm here with Jaqueline Jenkins today. Jaqueline, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Daryl. I love the title of your podcast as God truly intervened when you stepped into our life and allowed for the miracles to take place over this past year.
One of my mentors is Sam Davis. And when Sam and I first met, it was at New Waters Recovery. He was coming down to visit New Waters, and I didn't realize they were going to interview him for a podcast. And I got invited into the podcast interview along with Sam. And anyway, that's the first time that I met B. Reeves, and it was B that introduced us.
Yes, B has been a great friend of mine. My first corporate job, he was introduced to me off the bat, and I'm so grateful for it. He's just an amazing human, and I'm so happy for him and his recovery and everything great that they're doing over there at New Water. So truly thankful that he introduced us.
Do you want to talk a little bit about your the kind of work you do and your background, or?
Yeah, sure.
or
So, born and raised Raleigh, North Carolina, and now live in Morehead City on the coast with my husband. We have started 3 businesses in the past 6 months. But my background historically has been in cybersecurity consulting. And so now I have my own cybersecurity consulting business. I own a organic spray tan franchise, which is like my creative outlet, and that's called Beaches by Beat Tan. My cybersecurity company is J&J Advisory, and then my husband is an organic farmer, so he is now offering custom organic gardens and is going to fully manage them for families here on the coast as well as in Raleigh, and that's called Healer and the Farmer. So we have been very busy since we first met you, Daryl.
Wow, that's a lot of businesses going on there.
You're going to do one, you might as well do 3,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't realize you were so entrepreneurial. That's amazing. I love it.
Yes. This year has been quite challenging. Starting off last December, we discovered that a sibling of mine was going through a really tough addiction, and none of us were privy to it. And thanks to starting the conversation with you, Daryl, our family was able to start to work through it. And it wasn't until August that we really had him back. But through that, I got laid off from my intense corporate job. And so I
Okay.
just decided to start my own business because why not? So here we are 3 businesses later. And I'd say that our family's doing better than ever.
I mean, sometimes when you go through things like that, it's really hard when you're going through it in the moment, but sometimes it opens up new doors, like, or in the process as you're going through it, things happen, in a way that now would you be where you are now with your businesses, you think, if you had not gone through all of that
Yeah,
hard?
I mean, it really pushes you to, and I think we were speaking about this earlier. When you see a loved one going through such a hard time, it really brings up a lot of things to the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that you can be your best self unless you really deal with all of your own demons. And seeing someone that that's been through a lot of the similar things as you have, it put a lot of things in perspective for me. And also to not know whether we were going to be planning a funeral, get a phone call. It really just allowed me to truly think about what matters and who I am as a person, what I want to bring to this world, and how precious life is. Although starting your business is difficult, and
Uh-huh.
there are some troublesome times. I really get to decide how I want to show up in the world, and I think that that's most important.
Thinking back on the how things kind of unfolded with you and your family, there's a lot of similarities. I mean, every case has some things about it that are unique to that case, but there are a lot of similarities between cases. And sometimes, I have to keep notes. I have to make notes because sometimes the details run together with families a little bit, that I'm working with. And just thinking back on your family a little bit, when you first called me, I guess you called me, you initiated the call, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
I
yeah, I
think
thought
it
so. B
was
gave you my number.
Christmas,
Yeah.
maybe Christmas Day or the day,
Okay.
I mean, somewhere in between, I
Yeah.
believe, I think so.
Uh-huh.
Um, I think, yeah, it was around that time. So I don't know what you were going to say, but it's just
That's
ironic that
a
here we are, it's almost Christmas time.
yeah.
And I can say that, everyone is thriving in comparison to
Mm-hmm.
last year.
We were really talking about doing an intervention,
Hmm.
but it never got there. And
No.
that's not uncommon. I mean, a lot of times that happens that it's really probably one of the most challenging things is getting the whole family on the same page, getting everyone unified around the solution. And that can be so powerful when you do, but that can be really challenging at times because you have all these different personalities and different members of the family have different ideas about what the solution should be. And then the emotions get involved, the fear. Maybe there's one member of the family. I mean, everybody's fearful in that
Yep.
moment pretty much, and I can remember hearing the almost like panic in your voice,
Chaos.
and
Yes.
and I remember what that was like when I was going through it, But some members of the family will push past that and be able to get past that fear to be ready to take action, even though it's hard. The steps are really hard and scary to take. But then a lot of times there will be one member of the family or a couple of members who just they can't get past the fear that they need to be able to take those steps.
Yeah.
What can you remember? Can you describe
Yes.
a little bit about what all of that was like?
Yeah. I mean, there are three siblings in my family. My dad and mom have three children, me being the middle child, and the two children that were not going through it, myself and my other sibling, we and my mom as well, we were ready to go with the intervention. We were calling friends in to fly in from all over the country because our other sibling is so loved and has so many people that care about him. I think there's so much to be said on all of this. So I'm gonna try to
Mhm.
keep my my thoughts straight and not be the ADD woman that I am. But what we realized is that my dad, who had a 20-year cocaine addiction, he was finding, all of this, I think, super triggering for him. And
Mm-hmm.
he's from a family of five, and he never really had to get true treatment, and it was a health scare, and now looking back, he wishes he would have done things differently, in his life
Mm-hmm.
and in this situation. But I think that in our planning and when we, were expecting to go through with this, I think he was going through his own feelings and emotions. And instead of thinking about what was best for his child, he was thinking about how he felt in that situation at that time in
Mm-hmm.
his life, and the embarrassment of having a group of friends, the stories that you hear of, we have a cousin who ended up dying of a heroin overdose, but his parents, have spent millions of dollars on his recovery,
Uh-huh.
multiple different interventions.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you
Mm-hmm.
have all these different things going through your head, and still to this day, had we gone one way, how would it turned out? God shows up and intervenes in your life. And
Right.
that is so great. But we ended up not having an intervention because he told um, the individual that we were planning a intervention. And it was, it took 9 months after that and several hospital visits, arrest, and just ultimate scares for everyone to finally be on the same page. But the second
Hmm.
that my dad decided that he was going to have boundaries and that he wasn't going to put up with anymore is the second that everything came into place, which we knew from day one that, dad being the leader of our family, it was going to take that. But I think he
Hmm.
had to go through his own realization and his own guilt of his own journey that,
Hmm. Hmm.
allowed him to finally see the pain that the addiction was causing everyone else.
Well, I'm glad it worked out. I'm glad it worked
Thank
out the way
God.
it did. So the family member we're talking about here did he go to a treatment program, or did he just
No, but
other
I
way?
will give, I think it takes a lot of willpower for
Mm-hmm.
anyone to stop. And I don't know, I know Sam Davis is has interviewed a couple times, but Adams Pritchard, he's another guy on the internet that is in recovery and
Mm-hmm.
actually from Birmingham, and we went to Alabama, so it's been great to watch him as a resource, talk about what it's like, for those in addiction to be ready to go out to the real world,
Mm-hmm.
even if they
Mm-hmm.
have had treatment. And so my dad and my sibling were basically tied to the hip for 30 plus days. It was due to not having a car and being in a rock and a hard place
Mm-hmm.
that that was the way that ended up. But that is what ultimately led him to be, sober from that drug. So
Mm-hmm.
we're very thankful that my dad was able to, stick by his side, and that he had someone like that. And I think because my dad had gone through it and gotten sober, that, he was able to be that person for him. Yeah.
Yeah,
But needless to
absolutely.
say, I realized that we all need therapy.
Uh-huh.
We all
Uh-huh.
need to deal with our demons. And when you see someone that doesn't recognize themselves anymore, it makes you start to question the actions that you had taken in your life. We both were very social people in college, have very social jobs, and we have a lifestyle, that is very, very promoted almost, to party. And
Mm-hmm.
so when when that changes, though, when it goes from a social setting to a private setting to, then your life is falling into shambles, I think is where obviously how we met. and
Uh-huh.
and where you take a step back and say, okay, what do I need to do and what do I need to deal with to ensure that that doesn't happen to me. So
Mm-hmm.
it was a very introspective time, to say the
Yeah.
least.
It brings up a couple of things. Just hearing you talk about that brings up a couple of things for me. And I'll see if I can keep my thoughts organized now as we
I
talk about this, because I have to remember the other thing while I'm talking about the one thing, right?
know there's just so much to
So,
talk about.
there is. One thing I'll say is that, I tell people who are dealing with a loved one battling addiction that we all have pain that comes into our lives. And a lot of times we have a tendency to want to hide or withdraw and not deal with the pain or avoid it, and what I had to learn, and I think that's been my default to a large degree, but what I learned eventually was that the pain, as hard as it is sometimes, is can be an impetus for growth. It's an opportunity for personal and spiritual growth. If you will lean into it, amazing things can happen on the other
A
side
hundred
of that,
percent. No, I love that. And yeah, this year is all about growth. For sure. For
um,
sure.
but when you're in the middle of it, it's no fun for sure. When you're going through that. Also thinking about just families, because I'm an interventionist and family recovery coach, and I go by the family recovery coach on social media. That's what I go by. And the family is so important, and you have a wonderful family, just like so many that I work with. You see family members that are really your close knit family and you really love each other. And I see that, and it's very evident. I would say that there is some level of dysfunction in every single family, right? Because we live in a broken world and everyone experiences some kind of traumatic event or some kind of trauma in their lifetime. Everyone has some kind of negative experiences, and we always bring some of that baggage with us into the family. And some of that tends to have an impact, have an effect on our children, and then it's just like a ripple effect,
Yep.
you know.
Well, I think that I saw something the other day that black sheeps are really just the generational curse breakers.
Yeah, that's good.
And
I like that.
yeah, and I believe that, and just really thankful that, our family has the spiritual aspect and the faith, and that we were able to lean on God and lean on Jesus. And I'm so proud that, my family instilled that in us, because I don't know where we would be without it. And I also am very black and white, and I let fear, get the best of me sometimes, but I'm also going to call out, just what everybody else is thinking, maybe not saying. And I'm so grateful that my mom, we call her the eagle for the Lord. She's a
Mm,
30-year-old cancer survivor, and very probably the closest person, to my sibling. And she finally was like, Jaqueline, you have to have faith. You of course, like, we could sit here and talk about whether there was going to be a relapse, but I am
mhm.
choosing to have faith and to believe that, we're on the highest path, and that we're through the darkness. And even at Thanksgiving, and I think that like you said, like, there's pain, and Easter was super traumatic for us. Christmas last year was super traumatic. So Thanksgiving, I hosted again in attempts to really, have a good time with our family and be able to kind of, set the record straight.
Mhm.
And of course, I had fearful thoughts, and I was wrong. And thankful that my mom, was that voice in my head, though, that, everything's going to be okay. And that, we just have to know that, and like have that visualization and that thought process. Cause otherwise
Mhm.
then you're just spinning your wheels. And I know that, that's part of the process for family and addiction. You probably deal with that a lot.
Yeah. Addiction affects the entire family, and there's plenty of people who can get sober or get into recovery without the help of their family. But certainly, I find that the best results come when the whole family understands addiction and the whole family is pulling together and the whole family recovers together, because addiction just can put everyone under a lot of stress and the relationships in the family under a lot of stress. I mean, ultimately, that's why the family recovery piece of it is what's so important to me, that everybody is gelling and healing together as a family unit.
Well, we still need you, Daryl, just as much as we did. Even though we're not in crisis mode, there's not chaos going on. I still believe that, and that is my ultimate goal for our family, is to be in group therapy. But everybody has to want it, and
Hmm.
I think that when there's been eons of addiction, right? It's like, and addiction, I think, also is something that comes with genetics, right? So I think that when that time comes, and if my sibling is ready to truly be that generational curse breaker, which he kind of already has, right? He kind of ruffled the feathers even more so than our dad did. To me, that'll look like us healthily healing and going to therapy to continue to heal, not in a time of chaos.
So I see a stronger family coming out on the other side of this already,
Definitely.
and yeah, I'm gonna
Definitely.
keep believing that, and I believe it is headed in the good direction, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
at first we said we would not get together unless you were there. And then that moved into we weren't all going to get together unless we had a family meeting. And we've been
mhm.
able to, we had one successful family meeting, but we had our first holiday without any fighting.
That's
And
great.
yeah, I mean, almost too good to be true.
Yeah.
But
I think that experience just recently, and I don't think, like I try to be to the best of my ability a vessel or an instrument that God can use. I don't, he's any wisdom that comes through me comes from him. And I want to give him the credit for all that. And
definitely.
there's like three different families that I was working with leading up to Thanksgiving, and all three families expressed concerns to me about what Thanksgiving was going to look like. And we really spent some time talking about communications and communication skills and what not to say and what to say, not to be walking on eggshells, but really to get them in the right mindset coming into the Thanksgiving holiday. And all three of those families reported the same thing, like, wow, this was probably the best Thanksgiving we've had. And I think it's just because everyone was communicating so much better. And a lot of times it's just a couple of little tweaks that need to be made. I think it's really common to if you've got a person in the family who is in recovery, for family members to ask, "How's your recovery going? I hope it's going great." And I'm like, "Don't ask that."
Yeah, we've learned
Yeah.
and I think that it's probably, females versus males, like
Mm.
just communication style is different,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and everybody's different, but we learned that speaking about it like it's a very like shameful situation.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you know we're kind of split on that in our family, that I think that the more we talk about it the better, but it wasn't,
Yeah.
it wasn't my experience, so I have to be respectful of that. And even doing this podcast, it took me a little bit of time to decide whether I should or not. But
Yeah.
I it was the worst time of my life, not
Yeah.
knowing. I
Yeah.
mean, we're 14 months apart, and we've done everything together, and even
Yeah.
the drug that he's addicted to, like it was fun for us. It was
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
was something that was, only once in a blue moon, something you can buy at a gas station. So we had no idea, that it was where it ended up. And there's so much guilt that comes along. And I'm sure you see that a lot, but
Oh
I just
yeah.
want to shed light on that, I had to deal, especially being an older sister,
Hmm. Hmm.
who definitely was there for his first drink, was there for, like I felt like responsible for a lot of this. And it took him telling me, like, this has nothing to do with you, which
Right.
is really funny and so true. And, but at the same time, I guess like my words of advice is that if you feel distant from, your brother or sister, and they're not being nice, or they're not like, you don't want to be around them, that probably is a sign that they need you the most. And
Mhm.
instead of me, going towards him prior to all of this, this is a year to 2 years beforehand, his emotions were so erratic, and he just was physical with me sometimes, and we're brother and sister, so it's like,
Mhm.
but we're in our 30s, so it's like, I put my boundary up and just kind of stepped away, when in reality, there was something way bigger going on. And I just wish that I had thought about that a little bit more, but now I know. And my prayer for him is that he gets to a point where he can share his story and, talk about how he was able to get through this without going through, your typical rehab. And I truly believe that it was God and his faith,
Mhm.
that allowed, and family, faith,
Mhm.
family,
Mhm.
and food. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know what the other F is.
It sounds good.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, you're making me hungry now.
yeah.
Uh, oh man, there were so many good little nuggets there that you said. You mentioned boundaries a couple of times, and that is so important for families to understand. Healthy boundaries. How to put those in place and how important those are. And it's simple, but it's not easy because of the emotions that get involved to set and maintain those boundaries. And obviously, from the things you've mentioned, that was key to the recovery in this
Yes.
situation. Hmm.
Yes. 100%. And I think that, families that have lack of boundaries, they probably have a high case or high chance of addiction also.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and yeah, I mean, we're a big, wild Southern family. So there's just like, I mean, literally, my in law is hilarious. I brought up boundaries with them, and he's like, what is boundaries? Literally, like, and very
Uh,
serious. What is boundaries?
uh,
What are
yeah.
boundaries? But I think, and I don't feel like it's a new age thing, but I am glad that boundaries are being discussed more,
Hmm.
because I'm even learning, how to have boundaries with myself, which is
Hmm.
super
Hmm.
interesting. And that's,
Hmm.
a whole journey.
You take me back 10 years. I wouldn't have known what you were talking about in that context if you brought up boundaries either. It's just been, I've acquired this whole new language around addiction now that I didn't have any clue about 10 years ago, or a little over 10 years ago. But I'm coming back to that, holding those thoughts in my head.
Yeah, well, we can
So
have another.
that,
I'd love to talk to you again now that we've had
yeah,
this. I feel like we could have like two more. And I'd love for,
yeah.
I think my parents' point of view could probably really help some people, because it was when they got help
Mm, hmm.
that everything started to fall in line. But I just wanted to thank you so much. I know, Daryl, that you losing your son and the way that you lost your son really impacted our family in such a positive way. And I know that you said that, to give the glory to God, which I 100% am behind. But I just wanted to thank you so much for sharing your story, and for, using that pain for purpose, because I really don't know where we would be if we didn't have you to call that day.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I
Yeah.
appreciate you being willing to come on to the podcast and
Yes.
share your story. And that means so much to me. It really does. And these are the kinds of things I hear stories, I get calls or text messages from families from time to time. And I'm like, would you mind sharing that? Because that would really help a lot of other people. But I understand how hard that is to do. Number one, it brings up a lot of emotions that maybe you haven't dealt with in a little while, and you're going back to those memories. I get that because I do speaking engagements and I tell my son's story, and I'm reliving it
Right.
as I'm telling it. It's very, very emotional. It's really difficult to do. And there's that. And then there's a lot of shame and stigma around addiction. When I mentioned earlier that we really shouldn't bring up how's your recovery doing, with our addicted loved one. But I think it is important to talk about in the right setting, to talk about what's going on with the family and to talk about the addiction because you got to get it out. You can't hold all of that in, and it's really harmful to try to hold it in. So it's just a matter of finding the right setting and the right people, whether it's a therapist or a family support, group, some type of peer support group or something along those lines, but having that outlet to be able to talk about it because that getting it out there, there's a lot of power in that, being able
Yeah.
to do that.
I know. And like I said, my prayer is that one day my brother's able to share, his story,
Yeah.
and this is part of his story, and he is going to heal people through this one day.
Mm.
And I still haven't shared that with him. So I'm sharing this
Uh-huh.
with you
Uh-huh.
for him, but because it's very woo-woo. But I believe
Uh-huh.
that, and I think that that turning your pain into purpose is what God wants us to do. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that even though I've never joined any of your meetings, just knowing that and my sister has, and she had, a great experience with it, but just knowing that that's there and the fact that you haven't taken me off your email list, I really appreciate too. And I recommend it
Yeah.
for, I didn't do it, but my sister said she had a great experience, and knowing
Uh-huh.
that
Oh
you have
yeah. Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
that available is great.
Yeah, and there's a lot of other meetings out there too. People can join. There's Al-Anon and Nar-Anon groups all
Celebrate
over.
recovery.
Celebrate Recovery, yeah, really good one. And Sam Davis has a meeting that's it's intervention on call, family and friends, and those are 1 hour meetings, and a lot of interventionists in on the call, and a lot of great advice there. And so yeah, there's all kinds of meetings out there for people that if you can't find, you'll be able to find something in that fits your schedule,
Yeah.
um, regardless of what it is. So,
I
yeah,
am grateful that I have a great friend group, network, and
yeah, yeah,
unfortunately have gone through this, way too many times with friends, and didn't end up so well. But I have
mm,
a big network of friends, from college and beyond that I was able to lean on through this, because I definitely think that talking about it is key. And
yeah,
grateful that my husband was there for me, and he went through his own issues at a young age. And I think he was kind of integral in all of this because
helping,
he had
yeah,
gone through it. And he could give advice to my parents to try to help them understand what
hmm
was going
hmm
on, and the best way forward. But boundaries is key.
yeah. Well,
All right,
Jacqueline, thank you
Daryl.
so much. I
Yeah, thank
appreciate it again.
you.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
well, I'd love to come on again, but it's great following you on TikTok, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you for tuning in to When God Intervenes. If you found today's episode helpful, please subscribe and leave a review. Your feedback helps us reach more families in need of hope and healing. For more resources and support, visit our website at thefamilyrecoverycoach.com. Until next time, stay strong and keep the faith.